Last week, Entertainment Weekly put together a cover story focusing on The Last Jedi, featuring interviews with director Rian Johnson, Mark Hamill, and Daisy Ridley to name a few. While the cover story was interesting in that we were able to learn new details about the caretakers of Ahch-To and Snoke's Praetorian Guard, the most fascinating aspect for me was the discussion involving Luke's role in Episode 8, and more specifically, how it relates to his reasons for relegating himself to the primitive temple on Ahch-To. There are many elements to Episode 8 that I'm looking forward to, including the continued development of Kylo Ren and his Knights of Ren, Supreme Leader Snoke, and the potential for a more in-depth look into his character, and the emergence of a full-scale war between the First Order and the Resistance for control of the galaxy. All of these are going to be great, but the aspect that I'm looking forward to the most in Episode 8 is Luke Skywalker and the role that he has, not just in the story that started with The Force Awakens, but hopefully in reshaping the Force and uncovering a new direction for the Jedi. Now, I have to be honest, when I first read the title of the Entertainment Weekly cover story, which was The Last Jedi, Can Rey Save Luke Skywalker from His Own Darkness, I was a bit taken aback, particularly after reading the section of Part 1 entitled The Broken Warrior. I'll admit that had I been able to record last week, my reaction would have been a bit spicier than the video is now. But it's important to recognize that it probably isn't best to read too much into these promotional materials, primarily when discussions are intentionally vague and leading motivations are to provide a little bit of insight and generate interest in the film. From that perspective, this cover story is fantastic. At the end of the day, the article doesn't definitively point in any single direction for what we'll actually see in the film. However, as someone who's looking forward to Luke's role the most, and who sees the reason for him being alone on Ahch-To while the galaxy is at war as one of the most fascinating questions going into Episode 8, I hope that we don't see Luke's role resemble that implied by the cover story's title. That is, that Luke needs Rey to rescue him from the dark side within the typical light side dark side framework of the Force. Again, I don't want to read too much into the article, as nothing definitive is implied, but there is a real suggestion within the EW cover story that Luke is on the island to hide, not because he's a coward, but more so out of confusion and guilt over the events surrounding his nephew's fall to become Kylo Ren. In many ways, through the words of director Rian Johnson and Mark Hamill himself, it's alluded that Luke has almost given up, seeing it better to isolate and banish himself rather than attempt to fight. Luke completely failed to detect the darkness in Kylo, and now almost fears the dark side, potentially leaving him vulnerable to it. Personally, while I believe it's perfectly reasonable for Luke to be a broken warrior on Ahch-To by the time of Episode 8, given what happened to his order, I believe that the more interesting story isn't merely that Luke is hiding and struggling to not only understand the dark side, but must be saved from his own darkness by Rey, but rather that Luke ultimately attempt to embrace the darkness through a reconceptualization of the Force away from what was understood by both the Jedi and the Sith. Luke's isolation should be one dedicated to searching for answers, underpinned by the desire to find some kind of solution. Luke has been searching the galaxy with Lor San Tekka for years, collecting artifacts related to the Jedi and the Force, so it's hard to believe that he isn't in possession of knowledge that could be useful to him, particularly when the new canon has recently seen numerous works related to the Force emerge that demonstrate new ways of understanding the Force that differ from Jedi philosophy. Of course, being the broken warrior given the actions of Kylo Ren, the journey shouldn't be easy for Luke on Ahch-To, which is where Reys Role should come in. Rey shouldn't be the one to guide Luke and save him from the darkness. Rather, Rey should be the one to give Luke the confidence he needs to do what he knows must be done. That is, to reject the tenets of the Jedi and their singular approach to the Force, and to find the balance between the light and dark that he knows is so much bigger than the philosophy followed by the Jedi and the Sith. In this respect, Rey's role won't be to save a broken hero from himself as he slips towards the darkness, but rather to assist Luke to pursue the answers that he's discovered, and then to embrace the darkness as a recognition of the totality of the Force, thereby giving the Jedi a new path and allowing Rey to fulfill a destiny of her own. I've previously discussed the numerous elements that have emerged within the current canon that suggest there's a new approach to the Force that could be useful to Luke, particularly after he's seen the destruction of the Jedi Order for the second time within half a century. This is an approach that moves away from only accepting a singular aspect of the Force, either the light is done by the Jedi, or the dark is done by the Sith, and accepts the totality of the Force. We've seen it with the Bendu and Rebels, the philosophy is followed by Chirrut and the Guardians of the Whills, and in multiple passages from works such as the Journal of the Whills and the collected poems, prayers, and meditations on the Force. By following this direction, Episode 8 would be transformative for both Luke and Rey. Rather than being a broken warrior who's vulnerable to falling to the darkness only to be saved by Rey to emerge as the same Jedi we've always known, the champion of the light, the Luke from the original trilogy, who would go on to wage war against the darkness embodied by Kylo and Snoke, we would have the broken warrior work in tandem with Rey to break the chains of prior dogma and develop a new approach to the Force that would give Rey the tools she needs to continue forward. To me, that's the more interesting story to be told from the point of view of Luke and Rey, and is why Luke must embrace the dark side together with her. Nonetheless, the Entertainment Weekly cover story is definitely worth the read. I'll put a link to the article down below if you'd like to check it out, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I would just mention quickly that I'll be releasing an update video tomorrow discussing my plans for the channel as we begin the run-up to Episode 8. But I do want to thank you all again for your patience as I've worked to obtain a new permanent place to record. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.